Hi, this is Junaid, neurocritical care stroke and epilepsy specialist. Today we're going to talk about convergence of virtual care and artificial intelligence. We're going to draw examples from evolution of stroke care, both in terms of virtual care and AI, and how it evolved as a modular service in the terms of software as service model, and therefore had huge implications in both evolution of the service, expectation of physicians and patients. So before I start, let me give you some of my disclosures. I'm a vice president of virtual care strategy at V1 Health, which is a telehealth global company. I'm also founder of AINeuroCare, which is an educational platform to disseminate and dissipate information about artificial intelligence for clinicians and physicians. I also am a member of multiple committees. These are listed below. One other disclosure, by the way, that this talk is going to be featured as a book chapter in an upcoming book of artificial intelligence in clinical medicine sometime next year. So objectives of this particular talk is to understand what really digital transformation is. What is virtual care as a service model and artificial intelligence as a service model? And then we're going to talk about these two service models have synergy and convergence. We're going to draw examples of legal and regulatory framework, how they even extrapolate and enhance it as a service model as compared to platform models. We're going to talk about reimbursement, and we're going to draw examples from stroke and evolution, because that is where the crux of the matter lies. Like, what is the real world example, the implication of these models itself? So what is the real problem here, right? The problem really is that where is the production gap, right? We have a huge production gap. We have proof of concept. We know artificial intelligence work. We have shown it in different studies, but it is impossible to make that leap from proof of concept to production gap. And that is extremely important that we are able to have it in real world. And the biggest issue is data. And we're going to talk about regulatory and legal framework, how it has evolved to improve at least access to data. How do you scale this? How do you produce trust within the system? And that trust, which will require evidence of precision, we need to make sure that how it is improved in a way during the modeling process that it actually improves care, value of care, and lives of patients and physicians, and most importantly, who will pay for it? Because that's the key thing, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we talk about all of it, but who is really going to pay for it? And that's the key thing that we have to figure out, given the current financial situation post-COVID, what hospitals and hospital systems are in. So what is digital transformation? Digital transformation is basically a three-step process. The first and the foremost is just digitization, then it evolves to digitalization, and then there is digital transformation. If you turn a map in a physical format into just a pagination of PDF, then you're going to realize that it just has no use case scenario. It has no increased evidence of producing new forms of data. What it is just literally taking that paper format and turning it into a digital format, and that's the lowest form of it. Then we move to the second step, which is digitalization, where you have some new forms of use case scenarios, some new user experiences. You can actually have mapping technologies, and you can see basically just the turn-by-turn direction. More than one people can access the data at one point. Again, this is good, but at the end of the day, this is not enough. And this is, believe it or not, where we are at the EMR cycle. We are just at the digitalization process, and we have not moved to digital transformation. Digital transformation is a completely brand new mapping technology in which you provide the data for the services that the other person is going to use, and in return, you also improve your own services because the data is generated both ways. And when the data is generated both ways and synced accordingly, you have a continuous learning platform, and that's where we want to be. And unfortunately, we are nowhere near, believe it or not, as far as healthcare is concerned in terms of digital transformation. That's where virtual care as a service comes in, because if you actually think of it as a digital strategy, when you think of it as a service model, then you can actually improve the two-way communication, the two-way sync, and then create a continuous learning healthcare system. This is built on the software service model, which is narrow, which is pay as you go, which is subscription based. And the reason behind it is that the person who's providing those services actually is committed to improving the security, making sure that all the available new technologies are already implemented. And therefore, as a service model, software improves significantly. And it also provides a good business model. I mean, believe it or not, Apple has reduced application fees for recurring payments to 15% cut as compared to one-time payment to 30%. So there's a huge push in the whole industry. Microsoft moved Office from Office to Office 360, which is a subscription-based service. So everyone is moving towards subscription-based service because this is a better business model in terms of improving features and maintaining security. And that's actually the key in healthcare. maintaining security to decrease the risk level. So software as a service will be the only way forward in healthcare if you want to maintain a high level of security. So what is virtual care as a service will look like? If it's going to be just telemedicine, it's just a service line, right? You're basically giving one service line and you're paying for that service and period. But when you think about virtual care as a digital strategy, then you have on-demand, pay-as-you-go, subscription-level service, basically the Netflix model. And believe it or not, all insurances are subscription-based model, right? I mean, it's nothing new as a concept. As a matter of fact, it's a newer concept in software industry. But we, as insurancers, have been doing, not me personally, but insurance have been doing that as a service model for a long time. And that will go from telemedicine to telehealth. What the telehealth will do is remote patient monitoring and virtualization of newer services like e-sitters, etc., etc. So we're going to see that continuous evolution that we're going from digitization to digitalization and the digital transformation. And most importantly, in my opinion, the key issue over here is that avoiding the type 3 error. We are building solutions to problems that does not exist or problems that do not want to get solution for. So it is important that when you have a virtual care strategy, then you identify problems within the workflow, within the patient and physician experiences, and you're able to provide solutions where it actually is needed. And unfortunately, we see a lot. People come up with a lot of even investor decks and they say, okay, and I ask them the first question, what is this trying to solve? Because I don't have this problem. What you have to do is basically make sure that you do not have this type 3 error. And virtual care as an experience, when you go through that and find the problems within that workflow, you will be able to avoid the type 3 error. That is the key, because all that work will be lost because physicians like me is going to ask the first question, where does it actually involve me improving my life or my patient's life, correct? So where is that situation going on? So virtual care is also a continuum. It is from digitization to digitalization to digital transformation, telemedicine just as a service for physicians and pharmacists, going to remote patient monitoring, healthcare IoT, teletherapies, and e-sitter status, which are all, believe it or not, are starting to get reimbursed, and therefore we're seeing all these services being deployed more and more. But the digital transformation comes when you have artificial intelligence getting into it, when you have computing like edge computing into it, when you have increased experiences with mobile health, access, equity going in, when you have data governance built into it through blockchain or other security measures, and data governance is also part of the whole strategy. That's where virtual care continuum shines. And the minute that continuum goes in, it becomes the data pipeline for AI. You have the best way to have data, and also you have the best way to actually get that data into value, because that's where you're consistently falling behind. You need a constant, continuous source of ground truth. If you don't have the ground truth, you cannot make those artificial intelligence, and therefore you'll make the continuous learning health system. We do not have a continuous learning health system. We'll get to it in a minute. So virtual care as a strategy will become the data pipeline for artificial intelligence. Now look at the big data situation. So big data is basically value, variety, velocity, and veracity. These all things are very, very important. And you need that data pipeline to be there. Because if you do not have a constant stream of quality, ground truth data, you're done. I mean, then artificial intelligence is just not continuously learning. You can still have an algorithm, and we'll come to that in a minute, why algorithms are important. But at the end of the day, what you really need to get to is a process where you go from a continuous data stream that is generated by virtual care to actually artificial intelligence as a service, both working in convergence. Now, why do I keep talking about this data pipeline, right? I mean, let me give you an example. So if you had a stroke on the road, like literally on a pavement, there's a higher chance that you're going to get better care, believe it or not, a better care if you have a stroke within the hospital system. Can you believe that? And the reason behind it is that there's a whole system that is around it that, person is catched up, the EMS is going to respond appropriately. You're going to go directly into the CAT scanner. It is even so much hard for the inpatient services to catch that initial symptoms begin. Believe it or not, they're in the hospital. How can you do that? Because there's no system behind it. The benefit comes in when you have it as a service established within the virtual care paradigm, that you have all these things streamlined. And right now, when you actually have the virtual care strategies being deployed in different hospitals, let's say stroke, and neurocritical care, I deal all the time, you're going to see a significant improvement in physician experience and patient experience as well, because you have an expert right there at the bedside. And it's just not about access, believe it or not, it is also the way that its access is deployed that it makes a huge difference. that, and then and there, when I'm writing a note, when I'm doing a communication, when it's audio recorded, when it's video recorded, it's already digitized. When everything is already digitized, then it's easier to get that data. That data is now transformed into value, and that value needs to be proposed. So therefore, it is very important. And this is not just going to be right now. This is going to be literally the future, right? I mean, we're looking at virtual hospitals at home. We're going to see that virtual care is going to evolve in a way that physicians are going to prescribe virtual hospital at home and not put them into physical buildings and hospitals. They already have labs on wheels. Believe it or not, India is a pioneer in there, and there's a significant amount of lab on wheels going over there. Mobile radiology, we now have mobile MRI machines, for God's sake. So we can actually literally send an MRI to the patient's house and then get them done. So it's increasingly, the technology is moving forward to help these services moving forward. Tele-rehab, for example, and continuous remote monitoring is one of the best ways to actually improve outcomes and decrease overheads and produce value in the healthcare. So we have seen all these, but again, we have to find a way to actually reimburse for it. Now let's switch gears. So artificial intelligence as a service. Why as a service? Because it has to be modular, it will be plug and play, it will be interoperable, and it integrates with the problem itself, the experience itself. If you do not have that, you cannot actually have a profitable service in the first place. You have to think about how you're going to commercialize the service. You have to think about how you're going to monetize the service. That monetization, that eventual commercial success is important, because if you're not going to have a service that some people want to pay for it, why are you building a service? And even if you want to keep it for free, this is the golden rule that I always tell my students. You know what? If you're going to write something and nobody wants to pay for it, don't write it, because that is your golden rule to understand if this is important enough to do something. And that's where it comes in. You have to have modular and plug and play and interoperable. Why modular? Why plug and play? Because this is the problem. Let me just go into this first. There's so many different aspects of artificial intelligence, right? There's education, both patient and physician. There's clinical services in terms of diagnostics, workflow. There's research experiences that you can have data that can transform the research experience as well. We're going to have virtual clinical trials going on. And then we have multi-omics, we have radiomics, we have genomics that we have to take into account. And then more importantly, believe it or not, artificial intelligence is used most in paraclinical services like insurances, like, billing experiences, etc. So all these different services need to be explored and moved. And this is where artificial intelligence, if it's modular, if it's plug and play, then it comes into play. Why? Because it decreases risk. If you have a lot of different services that are going on at the same time, and that data shift that happen, then your risk significantly increases. If it's a modular service, then you have multiple modules building on each other, and then you can at least have a control over the risk. That increases trust, right? You have one problem with one solution, and that trust actually goes linear. If you have one problem with multiple solutions, or the other way around, the trust decreases, because we don't know. To be honest with you, when I'm evaluating it for, let's say, if a hospital wants to buy an AI service and I evaluate it, I really look for that, because I really want to make sure that hospital doesn't get liable. And that trust comes in the modular format. And then integration, right? And that's, again, it's a big issue. We're going to come to it and how the integration is going to improve over time. You not only have to provide the value of evidence in terms of risk and trust, now you have to provide evidence of value, because that's where the payment is coming from. Let me explain in a minute. So, it is important that you concentrate on value, and then the value can be derived from patient-centric and provider-centric. Where is it coming from? Virtual care as a service. Why not in person? Because it's not digitized. It is not digitized. You do not have audio, you do not have video. If you have those data built in, then you can actually provide those services at a very fast way, and you will have more constant, continuous stream of data as well. Even let's say clinical documentation, I'm recording it. If there's an ambient intelligence in the room that is already making my note for me, what is going on? That audio recording is turning into an artificial intelligence as a service for clinical documentation, right? So that's why digitization of things are extremely important, and virtual care is the best way. Again, try to avoid the type 3 error as we go along. So let's switch gears to regulatory. So FDA really did not have a pathway for how to regulate artificial intelligence in medicine. What they ended up doing was they used their medical device platform and then turned it into software as medical device. So when you have software as medical device, again, a medical device is like a stent for the heart or for the brain or for the leg. It is not stent, right? Nobody approves a stent. Everyone approves a stent for the brain, for the heart, for the leg. So therefore, it's a modular. Therefore, it is actually approved in a way that you would have modular services. So if you're going to bring a stent in the FDA approval process, they're going to say what? So that's where the problem comes in the first place, because the regulatory environment is built for modular plug and play kind of method. Now, another thing that FDA has encouraged, and it's just not like explicitly out there that, FDA is going to, encourage virtual care. But if you look at the recordings, the meetings that are publicly available, they're encouraging significantly virtual care. And why? Same thing, data volume, data variety, and data velocity. Because if that is not the case, they understand that artificial intelligence cannot be a decent success. And that needs to be a success, because we can't continue to spend $6 trillion, about 18% of our GDP, going into healthcare. So that is a huge priority for at least US healthcare system, and for international people that would also be very important, because you can provide those excellent services at a fraction of cost. Now we look at these 343 entries. So FDA actually recently published the whole database in which artificial intelligence is approved. In all these 343 services, I personally could not find a single entry when there is a continuous learning process. They all have algorithms, they all have artificial intelligence, but they are not continuously learning. And that's the problem. So version 2 can come in with more data into it, but at the end of the day, there is not a single device on the market right now that is continuously learning. And that's a big issue. We need to get to that. We need to get to machine learning, which is constant, which is continuous, a continuous learning healthcare system that is the true value where artificial intelligence comes in. If you're not going to do that, it brings value still, but at the end of the day, it is extremely important that we get to that point. And that's where FDA is so keen in improving the data pipeline. And in my opinion, virtual care is the only way to go. Again, the biggest issue is risk, right? If there's a huge data shift, and that we actually noticed right now, right? Where did we notice it? We noticed it when the sepsis AI completely broke down. Why? Because COVID was a completely different disorder. And then when the huge data was shifted from regular sepsis that we see all the time to COVID sepsis, everything broke down. And the reason behind that breaking down was that we did not account for that within our algorithms. And that's where continuous learning comes in. That's what we found out. Oh my God, this just sucks. And there were studies that had been published in JAMA and everything about the epic sepsis protocol. And again, not to name any names, but at the end of the day, we have to have a system where continuous learning is there, because these are lives at stake, that accounts for data shift, both in terms of patients and providers. Because I have a different style of doing practice and somebody else might have a different one. So you have to make sure that there's a different styles that are accommodated for as well. So we need continuous learning, period. This is improving. Now, the Cures Act did was that it decreased the information blocking. As a matter of fact, by default, if you're not sharing information, you're actually at loss, and it's actually significantly high. It's $100,000 per incident. So if I don't share one blood pressure reading, it's $100,000. So people are moving heaven and earth right now to make sure that they comply with FDA in terms of information sharing, and they're not being considered for information blocking, because even any single entity can actually go online and report to FDA that, hey, this is information blocking, and they can be sued for it or be penalized for it. And then everything is becoming APF-fied. And this is amazing, important advancement in artificial intelligence, data governance, and of course, virtual care, because we're going to see that regulatory and legal framework helping us to get to ground truth in artificial intelligence. So now, who will pay for it, right? That's the key thing. Believe it or not, healthcare is a very different beast, right? It's not Amazon where you go from 2-day delivery to 1-day delivery. There's a clear value and you're going to get customers. Unfortunately, it's not how it works. We cannot actually prove in healthcare. Healthcare is driven through reimbursement than anything else. And reimbursement is unfortunately more policy driven than anything else. So we are beholden for innovation and breakthroughs, at least in healthcare, to more and more to policy and reimbursement than anything else. So let's talk about it. So how is Medicare and Medicaid paying for it? Medicare and Medicaid through CMS created this new technology add-on platform. And that platform, the real important thing was that you doesn't have to prove only one thing, which is if it works. Clearly it should work, but does it create value? If it creates value, then it's going to pay for it. So what do we mean by that? So let's say the cost of stroke is $103 billion a year. The direct cost is $38 billion, indirect cost and prematurity death is another $60 million or so. Huge cost of burden. If you can actually do something to save that cost, we'll pay you. That's their thought. So How did virtual care start getting paid? That was the main thing, right? Virtual care and stroke started getting paid because in the pre-pandemic, there was a lack of neurologists. Hospitals were eating the cost and they went to CMS and said, we can't eat the cost anymore, reimburse me. So it was since 2016 or maybe 18 that the stroke was, as a virtual care service, was reimbursed. No one else. I mean, psychiatry, opioid, etc. crisis. Again, there was a need and there was a problem. In the pandemic, it became contextual care, and post-pandemic, the genie is out of the bottle. Everyone wants virtual care, and that is it. So virtual care is here to stay, period, no matter what else everyone thinks about. I understand there's billions and billions of dollars of real estate that is dedicated to healthcare, which is going to be in problem, probably. But at the end of the day, virtual care is now here to stay. There are my patients with epilepsy, MS, which are chronic care patients, and they would never drive back to my clinic, period, because they would rather pay me directly, not through insurance, if it's not virtual care, because clearly they don't need to, because it's even more expensive to find a babysitter, parking, get out of job, etc. And they would rather just pay the $80-90 for a direct care as compared to even going through insurance. So virtual care is here to stay, period. Now, AI in stroke was getting paid because I told you about the cost. It's so huge. So when CMS realized that even if we can save 10% of those patients going through that magnificent cost of indirect costs and premature mobility, mortality, and the direct cost, if we can do somehow decrease that cost, I'll be happy to pay you. And that's what VizAI and Rapid AI comes in. They were automated CTA perfusion and CTA angiography detections that decreases the time and decreases the latency for stroke care. So guess what? CMS said, excellent, you're creating value. Let me pay you for it. And that's what happened exactly when virtual care as a service, because that's where, believe it or not, most stroke, even in-house strokes, it is faster to get the virtual person on board, and people have tried that. Believe me, people have tried that. I told you many examples before, on-road versus in-hospital stroke. Virtual care is faster at delivering care increasingly in terms of emergency and decreasing the latency in things like stroke. So virtual care, the physician beams in, artificial intelligence automatically detects hemorrhage, large vessel occlusion, or mismatch on CT perfusion. What do you get? Value. Okay, and more importantly, you get proven value. What are we going to do about it? We're going to pay you for it. So that's where the modular approach comes in, and for both virtual care as a service and artificial intelligence as a service. I wrote this paper, I think a year ago, that details all the different aspects of artificial intelligence and virtual care as a combination in telestroke. So feel free to read through it. I also made an animation explanation on my YouTube channel, so feel free to actually explore that as well. This is going to continue to evolve. We are already seeing that, there's acute care and stroke, which is completely transformed by both these services. We're looking at home right now. We are actually in the process of creating more and more solutions in terms of continuous monitoring to improve stroke care at home, and then eventually move to chronic care as well, because we now have e-sitters, telerehabilitation services, etc., that we can actually tap into to make sure that even for chronic care patients, value is driven. And then hopefully when you can actually show that there is value, we're going to get reimbursed for it. And then same thing, AI as a service is also evolving within that, because when we have continuous amount of that level of data, I don't have the capacity to, as a physician, to sift through it. I need an AI to help me through what is important, how to visualize that data, how to improve the outcomes with that data. So we will need that, period. It's not just a matter of if, it is a matter of when. So this is, again, a huge colossal opportunity. I talked about stroke because I'm a neurologist, neurocritical care, and epilepsy specialist, but we waste $1 trillion a year in US. If we save only 10% of it, that's $10 billion a year. There's a colossal opportunity to show value. It is just that we have to make sure from the mindset perspective that we are actually thinking of it from the first point, avoiding the type 3 error, and then showing value. All these references are available on my website as a blog, and these are the links for it. I'll make sure Wonderland AI can actually have them and dissipate them. The key takeaways at the end, and I really wanted to thank Wonderland AI for providing me this opportunity to talk to you guys today. Grateful. Thanks. If you save a life, it is as if you saved the life of mankind. Please make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel and my newsletter. If you want to get in touch with me, the best way is to go through Twitter or via LinkedIn. Also, make sure you follow the Academy website for regular updates. Thank you so much.